Today we're talking with Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games, who designed Scythe, Viticulture, Euphoria, Charterstone, and Tapestry. He's written the book called A Crowdfunder Strategy Guide, and we recently named his company Legendary Publisher of the Year and the game Wingspan Best Digital Tabletop Game. This is Legendary Tactics. Jamey Stegmaier is a hugely successful entrepreneur and game designer. He's the CEO of Stonemaier Games, a published writer, and much more. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. So I have to say, Jamey, what impresses me most about your company is surprisingly not all the incredible games. I mean, we've done about 17 videos on your games now, and they're really amazing. But there's something that impresses me even more than that, and that's the philosophy that you seem to use. And I noticed that you accept interviews with small channels like ours at 1,600 subs, some down to 100 or even 10 subs. And you interview people all over the world too. And in your book, you discuss thinking not about all the myriad backers who might support you, but rather who your next backer is going to be, and you talk about the individual. So tell me about why you make time for channels like ours and how that fits with your business philosophies.
Well, I love that question, and you're right. I do try to talk to content creators like you that have 1,600. I mean, that's a great number of subscribers to have.
Thank you.
But I think I try to focus less on the number than the engagement. Like out of those people that you reach, your audience, which includes me now. I'm a subscriber to your channel as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks so much.
People like different forms of content. I have a lot of reviewers that I follow and enjoy their content, or anyone who makes content in the game industry, and I follow them for different reasons. And so I think people follow and engage with a variety of content, and I just want to be able to reach those people and have conversations with a variety of people, so that there's a diverse array of conversations and opinions out there about our games and games in general. So, awesome. Yeah, it's just It's fun for me, and plus, I never thought that anyone would want to interview me about anything like this. So it's just an honor that anyone who has a platform would want to talk to me about my games.
Well, you've been busy this year. I watched a ton of your interviews, and learned a lot, and they were all really entertaining. So. That's really good. So something I find too, and I don't know if this is true for you as a YouTuber, is that when I make a video, I think about one person that I'm making that video for. And often there's three of us at Legendary Tactics, but often I'll make a video for one other person at Legendary Tactics. Like, this is the stage he's at. Do you find that's the same for you?
That's an interesting way to approach it. I think about that a little bit, but it's more in terms of the language that I use. Like, I've noticed that there are lots of YouTubers, and I'm sure I do this sometimes too, where they start a video saying, "Hey guys," or "Hey everybody," which is fine, but I try to think of it, it's similar to you in that when someone is watching a video, they're not watching it with a bunch of other people around them.
Right.
It's one individual watching the video. So I want to make it feel like I am talking to one person, that I'm addressing one person, because that's probably how most people are consuming the content. So I do try to think of it that way on a individual basis, even though I know that hopefully I'm talking to eventually more than one person that's going to watch the video.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. That's really cool. So we've got tons of great publishers on our top 10 list, and this year we've selected Stonemaier Games as our number one publisher for a variety of reasons. I haven't released the video yet, but that'll be coming out in the next week or so. But I noticed that you often post videos in your channel that promote games made by your competition, and I think personally that's really classy about how you selflessly promote other people. I'm wondering if you why you take this approach of promoting other people's content, and also is there another publisher whose ethos you really respect?
Yeah. I have so much respect and admiration and appreciation for my peers in the gaming industry. I learned so much from other designers and other publishers, from the designs, from the types of production that other publishers use. And so it's exciting for me to share that with other people, because I've learned so much, and I want other people to learn from it as well. So my YouTube channel and my Instagram, my YouTube channel is focused on game design. So I'm kind of speaking specifically to game designers through that channel. And on Instagram, I often talk about the games that I'm playing on there, and most of them are not Stonemaier games, or at least not published Stonemaier games. So it just, I guess I just like to share the love, basically. I love games. I love this hobby as a gamer and a publisher and a designer, and I like to share those things with other people.
It really shows. Every video you make, I sense that.
Thanks.
So you're also a game designer, but Stonemaier Games have a really clear brand, and you feature quick beginnings, organic ends, accessible entry points in your game. The thing I notice most is your high quality components. I mean, you touch the paper and it feels like linen. It's gorgeous. There's a sense of progression through your games, and I've been playing Tapestry the last couple of nights and really enjoy that sense of progression. And you also go for memorable moments in your game, and I'll tell you a little bit later about that, but about a moment in Viticulture with some friends. But anyways, for the game designers out there, you say that if you've got two friends and one has an incredible idea for a game and the other has a terrible idea for a game, and the second one has transferred that terrible idea into an actual game, that the second person is miles ahead of the first, because you have nothing until you execute or act on that. So beyond your core 12 tenets on your website that people can go and visit, what advice would you give a designer to successfully pitch a game to Stonemaier Games?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I like that I think you've pulled that a little bit from an article I wrote about your idea is brilliant, your idea is terrible.
Yes.
With the concept being exactly as you described, that having ideas is wonderful. It's great to have wonderful ideas, but an idea itself isn't really worth anything. It's the execution, it's the time and effort and energy you spend into playtesting and designing and actually building prototypes that makes something worthwhile for a publisher. So one of the things that we look for in a games that are pitched to us, are games that designers have spent a substantial amount of time actually working on and iterating and playtesting up to the point that it is a fully playable, fun, functional product. There are all those guidelines on our website too. Like, it needs to be a game that can play from 2 to 5 players. We'll later add a solo mode if you haven't already. It needs to flow well. You mentioned the sense of progression, easy onboarding, those types of things. But one of the biggest things is just that you have taken more than just an idea and actually developed it into a fully functional, playable, fun game.
That seems like it's much harder to do than it is to talk about.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
So am I correct that all of your 10 games have digital versions now?
We, in some form, yes. With the most basic form being on Tabletopia, which is that. Have you used Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator?
I use Tabletop Simulator, yes.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what those are, they are kind of physics-driven platforms where the platform itself doesn't know the rules of the game. It just knows what components look and feel like. And so you have to still know the rules of the game to actually play the games in there. So all of our games at least have that. And then I think around half of our games now have full AI digital versions.
Very cool. Tapestry, is it on that list?
Tapestry is in the works.
Yes,
we have a developer working on that. And Tapestry, I think, will be the first game that makes an appearance on Board Game Arena, which is kind of a hybrid between the two. It's semi-intelligent, but you still need to play against human players instead of just against an AI.
Well, I'm excited to hear that. I love digital versions of their games, and I mean, there's a time and a place, but during COVID, the digital games they really carry well. So, so okay, here's the hard part of the interview. This is where you have to pit one baby against another. Wingspan Cardboard Edition versus Wingspan Digital. And full disclosure up front, I absolutely love both of these. They're fantastic games, and so I know this is going to be a hard question, but there's different times and different places I think that each of these work. But overall, if a person can only experience this game in one format, which is the format that you would recommend them to? And what are your thoughts about concrete or physical board games versus digital tabletop games?
I mean, in that case, I do have to go with the tabletop version. During COVID, I agree, things are very different now. And so I hope people are playing in the safest way possible, however they're playing, tabletop or digital. But for me, nothing replaces the tabletop version of pretty much any game. Just having that tactile experience at the table, I love. I do think that Monster Couch has done a fantastic job with the Wingspan digital app, and it does add things that aren't available in the tabletop version, like different backgrounds based on the season, different bird sounds, different animations. But I'll always come back to the tabletop version.
I noticed some Easter eggs in the Wingspan too. There's some text appearing very small in the distance and little eggs popping up, and you guys are having a lot of fun with that. So that's really cool. But actually, I have to tell you, my first introduction to Stonemaier Games was back at Gen Con 2016. Scythe was being released, and of course, we're searching around through all the games. And funny enough, Legendary Tactics is new this year, but back then the three of us went to Gen Con, and we all wanted to buy each other one game. So Scythe was the game that we bought for NATO, and it's been an awesome experience. It's a really great, even single player game, I think. But more recently, recently, I had an experience with those same two friends. They gave me an after-action report after playing Viticulture, and I confess it was really comical because they were completely invested in your narrative of the game, and one of them was saying, "Oh, I can't believe I only, if only I'd managed to mix up this great rosé, then I would have dominated the wine market." And as an outsider, I was laughing because I've never heard anyone so excited about planting vines and harvesting grapes and filling orders, and so you've had really huge success now with an ornithology themed game, and I never would have expected to have so much fun with a game about wine, which I love viticulture too, which is a drink I don't even like, and birds, a hobby that I don't even follow. So what on earth would cause you to create games on these themes?
Yeah, well, viticulture was it was a partially misguided original. I'm glad it worked out, but that was the first game that I intended to self-publish, and I was thinking I wanted to design a Euro game that didn't have sci-fi or fantasy elements. I love sci-fi and fantasy elements, but I wanted something that would appeal to gamers and non-gamers alike, and especially in wine lovers. What I later learned is that the gaming audience, like it's very hard to convert someone who only likes wine into gaming. It's a lot easier to convert a gamer into a theme that maybe they're not all that invested in up front. So I learned that with viticulture. With Wingspan, it was one thing that I really liked about it was when I played it for the first time, not in Gen Con. It might have actually been at Gen Con 2016 that I played it with Elizabeth for the first time. I had this feel of a collector. I felt like I was collecting things, and it didn't really matter to me that it was birds. But the birds were unique enough that it felt like, okay, I have this diverse array of this collection, and as soon as I realized that, I kind of remembered that a lot of gamers are collectors. We have that collector instinct in us. Yes. And so that made me think that gamers would be open to it, even if they didn't care about birds.
I would say collectors and organizers, too. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Oh, board gamers just love organizing. So out of curiosity, too, we were chatting about Tapestry last night, and I felt like there might be possibly some influence from Cosmic Encounter with the asymmetrical factions, maybe some Terra Mystica in there, and, of course, some Sudoku. Am I right on any of those counts? You designed Tapestry?
Yeah, I did design Tapestry. I would say the closest there is Terra Mystica. Terra Mystica has influenced a couple games, including Scythe and Tapestry in terms of the progression. There's also a little bit of Feast for Odin. Have you played a Feast for Odin?
I haven't, no.
Feast for Odin is another worker placement game from Uwe Rosenberg. Not another, just a worker placement game from Uwe Rosenberg. And it has a ton of actions, like a ton of worker placement actions. And I loved that, but I wanted a way to distill them a little bit so that you're not faced every turn with 50 different actions. Because I think there are 48 different benefits in Tapestry, but on any given turn, you only have really access to 4 of them. You're advancing on one of the 4 tracks. So that was a big inspiration for it, as was Russian Railroads, which has a digital implementation. That's on a Board Game Arena. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to have to check both of those out. Thanks for the suggestion there. Yeah, so tell me about creation.
Okay.
Does the need to create ever go away, or what inspires your creation, or do you ever feel like there's just not enough time to bring everything to life that you want to?
I always feel like there's not enough time. Time is by far my most precious resource in terms of, especially in creating games, because games do take a long, long time to create, especially new games. But in terms of creative energy, I'm curious if you can relate to this, but I bounce around a lot. I like variety. Yes. And so I have different types of videos. I have different types of blog entries. I work on games and expansions, accessories. So I work on a lot of different things, and if I ever find myself getting maybe a little burned out or getting close to being burned out about one thing, I'll just take a break from it and move on to something else, and I try to mix it up a lot. And that really, really helps keep things fresh for me. Have you experienced that with your content?
Absolutely, it renews us. We actually started the channel just playing teamfight tactics, and we moved on, and one of us tried a military game, and suddenly we're like, hey, you know what? This is a great way to just channel our passion and our fun. So, and in whatever we're interested at the time. So when Wingspan pops up and blows our minds, then I mean, for the last month we've been playing a lot of Wingspan. So
nice.
So we focus a lot on the channel on strategy tips for gamers. Do you have any strategy tips you would offer for one of your favorite Stonemaier games? I'll leave that in your court, which one you choose.
Yeah, so you mentioned Scythe earlier. In Scythe, one of the things that I try to do very early on is I look at my player mat paired with my starting location, my starting territory, and I try to pair my first 2 actions so that I can use the bottom row action at the end of my second turn. So usually I have to kind of just figure out which resources I have quick and easy access to and how I can use the trade and produce actions on the top row to get a bottom row a benefit. So I try to get that as early as possible. That's one of the things I do in Scythe.
Yes.
I wanted to maybe mention a couple games here. So in viticulture, one thing that I mentioned, one common criticism in viticulture is that people don't always like the cards that they have in their hands. Maybe they don't like the vine cards, the exact wine order cards, the visitor cards. And I think the key to remember in viticulture is that the game is going to give you a lot of cards over the course of the game. You get free cards all the time. It's very easy to draw cards. And so it's less of a game about choosing like which cards to draw. Really, you don't have that choice. You're drawing blindly from the top of the deck. And it's more about responding to the cards that you have. And so even if you have a certain strategy in mind, I try to really always stay open to pivoting based on the cards that I have, while kind of not straying too far from my core strategic path, but being able to stay nimble and flexible based on the cards that I get. So that's viticulture. And then let's see, Tapestry you played the most recently. What can I say about Tapestry? So Tapestry, usually I look at my civilization. I let my civilization guide me to a certain extent. And for me, actually, in Tapestry, this is more of just a personal preference, but I often use the science track really early in the game because I love all the different tracks, but I often don't know which one I want to choose in any particular game. So I'll just start out with the science track, and if that point, whatever that ends up rolling, because you roll a research die, you end up advancing on a random track. I'll say, okay, the game made the decision for me. I'll just advance on this track and really focus on trying to finish that track.
Yeah, so NATO was onto that last night. He said, the science track is the way to go. And the one thing we were wondering was specialization versus diversification.
Yeah, I think in Tapestry, it really does help to focus on at least one track, on finishing one track. It is, I would say, commonly possible to finish two tracks. And so typically I try to finish one and then advance fairly far on two others. And then one I usually don't focus all that much on.
Right, yes. Yeah, that was exactly how I played last night. I ended up being forced. I was going to play military, and NATO locked me down with a card that he would get the bonus every time I move forward. So I just switched over to the tech tree and actually won the game with that. So it was a lot of fun.
You stayed nimble,
Yes, indeed. I think that's important as a gamer. So would you be up for doing some rapid fire questions? We don't want to take too much of your time today. Are you okay if I fire a bunch at you and we'll do very short answers? Okay.
Definitely.
So let's see what we got here. What's the best bird card in Wingspan base game?
My favorite bird card is the peregrine falcon, more thematically than for the card itself. But I just love that they're the fastest animal alive.
Cool. Best game created before 2000.
So I was going to say Scotland Yard for this, but you already brought it up. So I'm going to say Magic the Gathering. I think Magic is a fantastic game. I continue to learn so much from it.
Ooh, we're big Android Netrunner fans, so some parallels there. Best game to play with a significant other.
Megan and I have really, really enjoyed, this is a very specific answer, but we've really enjoyed the cooperative expansion for Shards of Infinity. Have you played Shards of Infinity?
I have not.
Ooh, it has a great digital implementation. This is a game where I actually played the digital version first, loved it so much that I bought the tabletop version, and then bought the Shadow of Salvation cooperative expansion, which isn't available on digital yet. But yeah, we really enjoyed playing that cooperative expansion.
Ooh, I'll check that out. Most memorable game you played during COVID?
Most memorable game played during COVID? There's a lot. I've actually been able to play a lot of games, mostly digitally. I'm going to throw out Seven Wonders here, because Seven Wonders on Board Game Arena, as I've played Seven Wonders for years, but on Board Game Arena it becomes a filler game because it plays in like 10 minutes because the digital implementation takes care of all the shuffling and organization. So it's been really nice to add that to our game nights. Just like at the end of the night, we'll just play a quick Seven Wonders, which is something I've never said before on the tabletop version.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
One word to describe the most important characteristic a game designer needs.
I would say innovative at this point. Given how many games are out there, how many people are designing games, a real focus on standing out with innovation or striving for innovation, I think, is really important.
Favorite kind of wine?
Kind of like you, I don't drink a lot of wine, but I do love, if I'm going to drink wine, it's going to be red. It's probably going to be a Cabernet or Merlot.
Okay. Best kids game that's still fun as an adult?
Again, we could answer Scotland Yard here, but I will say Coconuts. Have you played Coconuts?
No, I haven't.
It's kind of a silly dexterity game, but it's actually a lot of fun for anyone, any age. Yeah.
Best expansion for a base game?
I looked back at I did a video about this like 2 years ago, and I need to do another one because I played a lot of expansions since then. At the time, I said Clank expansions. I really do love Clank, and I think the Clank expansions are really easy to integrate into the game. I don't have a particular one in mind, but the Clank Expedition expansions where they just add a new map and maybe a few little mechanisms and tokens, I think they're fantastic.
Very cool. And what game did you play most recently?
Most recently, I played Pandemic Legacy. We finished the Pandemic Legacy Season 0 campaign yesterday.
Oh, very nice. Oh, that's cool. And does it stack up against the other 2 seasons?
It definitely does. Yeah, it's incredible what Rob and Matt have accomplished with that series. I don't even know if I can rank them because they're all so innovative in their own right. Have you played the other ones? Have you played?
I've played through both of them. Yeah,
played with both. So you haven't played Season 0 yet, though.
I have not.
Not yet.
No.
Yeah.
I've looked at the demo on tabletop, which looks really cool. Spoiler free.
We really enjoyed it. I would actually say there's
awesome.
one thing in it that makes it the best. One thing they didn't do in the first 2 regarding progression that will take it to the top. Yeah.
Oh, very good. 2 more questions. A novel that's inspired your game design.
A novel that's inspired. For Euphoria, I looked at a lot of dystopian novels. One that came to mind was Hunger Games. Hunger Games there's little like nods to the Hunger Games in Euphoria.
Cool. And most anticipated game of 2021?
Of 2021, I'm really looking forward to a little game from Reiner Knizia called, I believe it's The King's Court. It's a 2-player tug of war game. I found that I really love tug of war games like Watergate, like Hanami Koji. And so it's just a little game. There are probably games that I'm actually looking forward to more, but that's one that I've pre-ordered that I'm really excited to get when it comes out.
Oh, very cool.
What about you? Do you have an answer for that?
I would say Ascension Tactics, I think, would be the one. That one looks really cool.
That's actually from the same designer as Shards of Infinity, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Sleeping Gods is another one that looks really interesting, too.
I can't wait to get that. Yeah.
Yeah. That looks so cool. Are you okay for time here if we do a few more questions, or do we need to? Yeah, okay, wonderful. So roll and write games. At the beginning of the pandemic, you designed a roll and write game to be played remotely. I see you've got a PNP version on your website. And for people who aren't familiar with those, can you tell us a little bit about what they are or about your game?
Yeah, so the general concept of a roll and write game is where one player rolls some dice and all players use the numbers on those dice to write down on a pad of paper, usually in a variety of different ways. Like that where you write them down and how you use those numbers can vastly vary. Also, there are games that differ in the way they use those dice. There's some games where you're drafting the dice from the middle and removing them from other players. But my favorite roll and writes are those that scale infinitely. So. And really, there's no player interaction with my favorite roll and writes. It's just, and they work well on Zoom. So you and I could play on Zoom remotely from far away, where one of us is rolling the dice. We both have our pad of paper and we're writing down those numbers. And so with that concept in mind, I designed Rolling Realms early on in the pandemic, when I hoped the pandemic would not last all that long. Because I wanted ways to connect with people. People were kind of struggling to find how to play tabletop games at that time. This is back in March, I guess, when you started your channel.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we have now taken Rolling Realms and we are making it into a full tabletop game where you can still play it remotely as long as both people have copies. It will soon, next year, I think midway through the year, we'll have a tabletop version of it.
Very cool. Would this be something sort of on the level of depth of, say, like a Yahtzee, where you're just having some fun, rolling some dice, quick game, that sort of thing? It
is maybe a little bit leveled up from Yahtzee. In Rolling Realms specifically, there are... you have a bunch of cards, and each card has a little mini game that is based off of one of our games, one of a Stonemaier game. So there's like a Viticulture realm, there's a Scythe realm, and each of them has just a slightly different mini game based on how you're writing down those numbers, how you're getting points from the numbers that you write down. So it is more complex than Yahtzee, but you only have to look at a few of those cards at a time, and so it's not super complex or difficult to learn.
Awesome. It's a game I can play with my mom, which will be great.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. So I want to talk to you about an idea. So you're based out of St. Louis, and I'm actually an English teacher by day. So an author that I teach quite a bit is Maya Angelou. She wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Have you heard of that one?
I have, yeah.
So I know you draw a lot of inspiration for new games from literature and pop culture and the world that surrounds you. And she lived for a good spell of her life in St. Louis. And I know you also have a real and profound commitment to empowering diverse groups. And you've created a declaration of action around these issues at Stonemaier. Have you ever, or would you ever consider creating a game based on Maya Angelou or the issues that she really cares about, like finding voice, fighting racism, or rooting out power imbalances?
Yes, I love this question. You prepped me with this question in advance, and I read it a few times. I love that you thought about this. having more diversity and inclusion and elevating, I think, underrepresented and marginalized people in the gaming community is incredibly important to us. It has been for a long time inclusion itself, but more in a passive way. And this year we try to be a lot more active about how we include people and welcome people into the hobby and make them continue to feel welcomed. In terms of that game specifically, I don't know if we definitely don't have that a game based on that in the works, but we do have a game in the works that that touches upon some of those issues through the veil of a science fiction theme. So it's kind of like, you probably have experienced this as an English teacher. There are plenty of great science fiction novels and fantasy novels that touch upon the real world through escapism in some way. And I would say that's the closest that we'll probably get, because all of our games have some sort of escapism to them, some sort of way that they capture people's imaginations by visiting other worlds. But we still want those to bring back to the real world, bring back to real moral and ethical issues and questions.
Yeah. Ooh, wow. That was very cool. So 2021, over 8 years, you've released 10 games, and this year you tripled your full-time staff from 1 to 3. And so what's in store for Stonemaier Games in 2021? And can you share with us anything about your next big release or any ideas simmering in your designer's brain?
Yeah. I was really, really happy to add Joe and Alex to Stonemaier Games last year. I think we'll stick with just 3 staff members in 2021. I think we have the right sweet spot right now. They're wonderful to work with. We do have Rolling Realms is probably the most direct thing that I've revealed so far as far as a new game that we're going to have coming out next year. And we have a few expansions. We have a Viticulture expansion that's in the works that we're working on. Yes. We have another Tapestry expansion that's in the works. There is a Viticulture expansion in the works. I don't quite think it'll be ready by 2021. And and a Between Two Castles expansion. That'll actually be the first expansion that we come out with next year. And there is one pretty big, actually 2 pretty big secret projects. One I don't know if it'll make it, and one that you'll know about in about a month.
Oh, wonderful.
Based on some of the things you said in this interview, I think you'll be. In fact, yeah, I'm excited to see what you think about this game when we have it, based on some of the things you've said today.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad to hear. So for content creators out there covering your games, is there anything you'd like to see us doing for you?
I appreciate you asking that. I mentioned earlier I used the term innovative for game designers, and I love to see content creators doing things that are a little different too. Like and I think you are already doing this. You have a commitment to make new content on a regular basis, and you mix that up both for your own sake and for your audience. And I like that. I like a fresh variety of content. Like there's a channel called Thinker Themer that I discovered a few months ago, where it's a couple where one person talks about the theme of the game, one person talks about the mechanisms of the game, and it was just like it's a slight tweak on the format, and I really enjoyed that. So just like slight tweaks on the format, I think are fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Jamey, so much for sharing your time with us today. And we really look forward to seeing what your company does in the future. And we appreciate you having us or visiting us on Legendary Tactics.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us today with Jamey Stegmaier. If you got value out of this interview, please consider giving us a like and subscribing. Thanks so much for your time.